Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to the Niktatorship and welcome to a brief little video which is meant to be a quick start guide to one of my favorite tabletop games of all time, Lord of the Rings the card game, otherwise known as Lord of the Rings the living card game, made by Fantasy Flight Games. So in this video, I'm going to not do an in-depth breakdown of how to play the entire game. I would save that for the rule book, or there are lots of other videos online showing you how to play. This is meant to be a quick start guide just to introduce my viewers to the mechanics of the game, the purpose of the game, just kind of the overall general scope of this game, so that after this video, when I release my solo playthrough where we're going to try to basically complete the quests that come in this core set, my viewers, when they watch those, they won't be completely lost or just thrown into a game that they have no familiarity with. So here we go, quick start guide. I'll set up the board, walk you through it, and then we'll go through kind of one round of the game to see all of the different phases. All right, let's do it. All right, so let's go ahead and run through one round of this game just so we can get familiar with the phases, the mechanics, and the overall purpose of the game itself. So very quickly, on the left, we have our player deck. This is where we draw our cards from. And on the right, we have the encounter deck. This is essentially the game itself that we are fighting against to try to win. In the center here, we have our quest. Now, we win the game by making it all the way through the quest. There are a couple different ways that we can lose the game, and we'll get to that in a moment. Now, I have kind of the first scenario set up and ready to go. So let's go ahead and just run through the different phases. And it's okay if not everything makes crystal clear sense, because again, this is just meant to be a quick start guide to get you familiar. Now, the first phase of the round is called the resource phase. So we're going to do two things here. First, we're going to give a resource token to each of our heroes. I'm going to represent my resource tokens with these blue die. So each of our heroes now has one resource, and then we're going to go ahead and draw a card from our deck and add it to our hand. And that's the phase. Okay, now we're going to move into the second phase, and that's going to be the planning phase. So what we do here is this is our main chance to play cards from our hand. We have different types of cards. We have attachments, which are things that you can attach to your heroes or other characters to give them some type of power-up or ability. We have allies, which are other characters that we can play to the field and use them for combat and committing to quests. And then we also have events, which are one-time events that trigger. You resolve whatever the effect is, and then they go into the discard pile. So let's go ahead and play an example here during our planning phase. So I want to play Snowborn Scout out to the field. First, I'm going to look at this number in the top left corner. That is the cost to play this card. It costs one resource, so I'm going to go ahead and take one resource off of, let's say, Aragorn. So I'll put that away. And that allows me to play my Snowborn Scout onto the field. Now, I can play any number of cards that I want to, as long as I have the resources to pay their costs. But for now, we're going to keep it simple and just play the Snowborn Scout. I'll say that I'm done playing my cards, and so the planning phase is now over. Okay, now we're going to move into the quest phase, which is really important and probably the most unique to this game. So the purpose of the quest phase is to try and get through our quest cards here. So right now, to get through the quest card, we're going to look at our active quest and see this number 8 right here. In order to get through that, we need 8 progress tokens on our quest in order to progress to the next part of the quest. Let's go ahead and, for the sake of argument, just say that I already have 2 progress tokens on there. So in order to make progress on our quest, we need to commit a certain amount of willpower to the quest itself. So if I go ahead and look at what I have on the board, willpower is represented by this little icon that looks like a sun at the top of your card. So Gloin, Aragorn both have 2, Theodred has 1, Snowborn Scout has 0, so he's probably not the best person to commit to the quest. So right now, ignoring card effects, let's just forget about those for a moment. Let's go ahead and say that I'm going to commit Gloin and Aragorn to our quest. To commit them, I'm going to exhaust them, and so I now have 4 willpower committed to the quest. However, the enemy deck also has a chance to interact with this quest and stop us. So on the right side here, we have the staging area. These are cards that have been drawn from the encounter deck but haven't yet engaged the field. Now, with this little icon at the top of their card that looks like a evil crown or tower, that represents their threat level. So right now, the 2 enemies in the staging area, that's where the threat level for the quest comes from, would equal 3 total. So right now, if the quest were to fully resolve, we would have 4 willpower against 3 threat level. We would have 1 more willpower than threat, thus we would put 1 progress token onto our quest. But once you commit your characters to the quest, the next step is to take 1 card, if you're playing with 1 player, which I am. The more players there are, the more cards you draw. For 1 player, we're going to take 1 card from the encounter deck and put it into the staging area. Now right here, this represents, or this gives us a chance to see the different type of cards from the encounter deck. We have our enemies, which are similar to our allies in the player deck. These are the cards that we're going to be fighting against. We have locations, which represent locations within Middle-earth that we can travel to. And we have treachery cards, which are like our event cards in our deck, where once they flip, you resolve whatever the effect is, and then it would go into the discard pile. So in this example, if I flipped this treachery card, we would resolve the effect, but then it goes away. There's no threat level associated with this card. So we would resolve the effect, and then assuming it didn't change anything drastic on our board, we would still have 4 against 3, and we'd put 1 progress token onto our quest. But let's consider another example. Let's say I flip a card, and I get another enemy. So in this case, another forest spider. Now, when we resolve this quest, we have 4 willpower against 5 total threat. Therefore, we lose the quest by 1, and we suffer a negative consequence, which would be taking our threat dial here and increasing it by 1. So, earlier, when I mentioned that there are multiple ways you could lose the game, the first is if all of your heroes die. Sorry, not him. If all of your heroes die, you lose. The second would be if this threat level makes it all the way up to 50, we automatically lose. So anytime we lose a quest and suffer threat to our threat dial here, that's obviously not a very good thing. It's basically the opposite of what happens when we want to progress through the quest. Instead, we suffer threat. Okay, once you commit your characters, draw from the encounter deck, and resolve the quest, you're now done with the quest phase. Now we're going to move on to the next phase. So once again, just for sake of argument, I'm going to kind of reset my board here. We're not really too worried about, the specific interactions with this play state. The next phase is called the travel phase. So if there is a location within your staging area, you can travel to it. Now, if I choose to do that, I'm going to take that location and I'm going to put it over my quest. You could lay out the board however you want here. This is just for this video. So this location I've just traveled to, so it is now the active location. Sometimes there's going to be card abilities on the location that you can follow as needed, but for now, it's the active location. And you could see that in order to progress or fully explore this location, we need 3 progress tokens. So just like our quest, how we needed 8, to get through the location, we needed 3. Now, traveling to the location has a good side and a bad side. The good side is it leaves the staging area, therefore its threat level no longer contributes to the next quest. The bad side is the location will kind of hinder any progress that we could make on our quest until we thoroughly explore the location. So this too this was the number of progress tokens we had on the location, or sorry, on the quest. I'm gonna set that aside. And now, let's just imagine next round in the quest that I outperform the enemy and I'm able to put 2 progress tokens on our quest. Instead of going on the quest, they're going to go on the location. And then, once I have enough progress tokens to have thoroughly explored that location, it will go away to the discard pile and we'll be back onto our active quest. And that makes up the travel phase. All right, so next up is our encounter phase. So this is where enemies in the staging area have the chance to engage with us as the player. Now, there are certain checks you need to make to do this, and it depends on the enemy's threat level and your and then also your current threat dial. We're not going to worry too much about that right now. We're just going to say that the forest spider engages us. So they're going to come out here, they're going to leave the staging area, and that's essentially all that happens. And so similar to the location, the good thing here is that it leaves the staging area, so we don't have to worry about its threat for the next quest. However, it's now engaged with us, which means that it can attack us. And that leads us to our next phase, which is the combat phase. All right, so in the combat phase, first we resolve the attacks coming from our enemies. So in this case, we only have one enemy engaged with us, the forest spider. Again, we're not going to worry about card effects here. We're just going to worry about essentially 2 things. Its attack level, which is 2, and its defense, which is 1. Oh, and a third thing, its HP, which is 4. So the forest spider is going to attack us. The first thing we do is we take a card from our encounter deck, and I like to place it underneath the attacking creature. This is called a shadow card, and we're going to get to what that means in a moment. Now, my next step is to declare a defender. So, again, for sake of argument, let's say all of my characters are ready. So if they were exhausted, we couldn't... So actually, let's do this example. Let's say Gloin is exhausted. He cannot defend because he's exhausted, but everyone else is ready. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm going to defend Forest Spider's attack with my Snowborn Scout. If I were to not defend the attack, then all 2 of his attack points would be dealt to me directly, and I would have to take those damage and put them as damage counters on my heroes. And again, remember, you don't want your heroes to die, because if all 3 die, you lose. But I'm going to go ahead and defend this attack. So I declare Snowborn Scout as my defender, I exhaust him, and now we resolve the shadow abilities. So this shadow card that was dealt underneath my attacker, I'm going to go ahead and flip it. And we can see here when we look at this card, forget about the card's normal abilities. All you're looking for is if it has a shadow ability. And Forest Spider, kind of confusing here because we have 2 of them, but Forest Spider does have a shadow ability. So this Forest Spider is the one attacking, and then this is our shadow, which does have a shadow ability. So you would go ahead and resolve the shadow effect, which are typically pretty damaging, and then you would carry on. Again, we're not going to worry about the specific effect here, but that's how they would work. On the other side, let's say this was our shadow card, and we flip it. Again, we don't pay attention to the normal card's effects. All we're looking for is a shadow ability, which in this case it doesn't have one. So, nothing happens. It goes to the discard pile, and we can breathe a sigh of relief. All right, now finally, we carry out the combat damage. So, Forest Spider has 2 attack, and our Snowborn Scout has 1 defense. That means we can only defend 1 attack point. So we suffer 1 damage because, again, it's 2 against 1. So we'll go ahead and put a damage counter on Snowborn Scout, and then we realize that his HP is only 1. He just suffered 1 point of damage, therefore he dies, and we're going to put him in our discard pile. Now that we've resolved the enemy attacks, we're going to get a chance to attack the enemy ourselves. So what I'm going to do is, let's do a couple examples. Let's say I attack with only Aragorn. I'm going to exhaust him, And now we're going to, there's no shadow effects for us attacking, so we're just going to compare attack points to defense points. So Aragorn has 3 attack, Forest Spider has 1 defense, so he will take 2 damage. Unfortunately, he has 4 HP, so he's still alive. He's not going anywhere. And if that were the case, we would wrap up the combat phase as long as there's nothing left to attack, and we would move on to the next phase. However, we have another option here. I have both of these heroes at the ready, so I'm going to attack Forest Spider with both of them. So I'll exhaust them both, and now we add up their total attack points, which is 3 plus 2, so 5 total. So now we're attacking Forest Spider for 5 total attack against 1 defense. That means we're going to deal 4 damage to Forest Spider. That equals its HP amount, so he's going to die. Now, once we've had a chance to attack with any enemies that we're able to and want to attack with, we will be done with the combat phase. All right, and finally, we move on to the last phase of the game, or of the round, which is the refresh phase. So what we do here is we ready up every character that has been exhausted, and then we automatically add 1 threat to our threat dial. So remember, when we reach 50 threat, we automatically lose. So by adding 1 at the end of every round, that's a way to kind of speed the game up and guarantee that, you know, if you weren't making any progress on your quests, but you might not be taking any threat from the quest itself, you're still kind of racing against the clock here, and you have an incentive to get through that quest, because otherwise you're going to take a damage each round and eventually die regardless of what you do. But there you go. Once you are done with the refresh phase, you move on to the beginning of another round, and that's going to start with the resource phase. So you would go ahead and add a resource to each of your heroes. You would draw a card, add it to your hand, and then we'd move on as we already explained. So there you go. That represents 1 round of Lord of the Rings, the card game. Again, we ignored a lot of specific abilities here, and as you play more, the game can get more and more complex, but those were some pretty simple examples just to introduce you to the base mechanics of the game. All right, so there we go. We have now seen, the board setup, 1 example of how a round of the game works. And now, after this video, we're good to move on to the solo quest playthroughs that I'm really looking forward to. I'm hoping to do multiple different versions. So in this core set, we get 3 different quests to progress through. And we also get 4 different starter decks. So normally with these games, down the road, you build your own custom deck and you can try to get through all 3 quests in one continuous campaign. But for the time being, we're going to start with this content with basically what comes ready to go in the core set. So we'll try to progress through those quests. And then here are the 4 structure decks. You'll see red, purple, green, and blue. These represent the 4 different aspects of the game. And we'll try to progress through all 3 quests with each different aspect and see how we do. We can even score at the end to rank up their performance and kind of see, which deck right out of the box is going to pack the most punch. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this quick start guide. If you're not already, subscribe to the channel so that when we do that solo quest playthrough, you'll be able to tag along and have some fun. And I'm really looking forward to playing this game and bringing these videos to the channel. All right, I'll see you guys later.